everyone. Welcome to Beyond Life Paranormal Research's podcast. I'm your host, Russell Reynolds. My guests tonight are world-renowned demonologists. They've been on the show A Haunting, several paranormal investigation shows. They were the first ones ever in the Conjuring house before Ed and Lorraine. Please welcome my guests at this time, Keith and Carl Johnson.
Hey, there they are.
Hello there. Hello there.
Hey, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you on. I follow you guys since I started in the paranormal field. So
you were telling me that. That's very, very flattering. Thank you. I do appreciate. Yeah.
Yep.
What did you first see us in? Ghost Hunters, perhaps.
Yep. I've seen you on several shows as well as A Haunting, like I said earlier.
Mm-hmm. We were doing this when there were no shows.
Yeah. Tell my audience a little bit about yourselves. There's some that aren't familiar with you guys.
Go ahead, Carl. You can do our intro.
He started the trouble.
No, he started it.
Yeah, we do that twin thing. Well, we both had, of course, an interest in things arcane and out of the ordinary, bizarre, even anything spooky drew us in. We had all the models from the Aurora models from Famous Monsters of Filmland. You could order them in little model kits, and like the spooky. Our early reading, and I'm talking about when we were 9 years old. Keith and I read Dracula, and we read Frankenstein, which are rather involved novels. That's what that's when we found out that not every word you want is in the dictionary.
Right.
Some of them are a little old-fashioned and all that.
Improved our reading skills, though.
Yeah, that it did. Yeah, it didn't help much, but yeah, it did improve our reading skills.
There was another thing, though, that did spark our interest as well. The fact that we did have some paranormal activity going on in our household. Carl and I were very, very young. The house was a brand new house at the time. It was built for our family. It was actually a present from my grandfather who owned the property. So we were about 3 years old when we moved in. And it was a pony corral before then. I think the house next to it, which was a very, very old house, well over 200 years old, I think where my grandfather lived, I think something may have been drawn from them on the property from that house, because we did experience paranormal activity. We were 5 years old, and my sister wouldn't remember this. She was a little girl in the high chair, but my brother and I were 5 years old. It was a summer evening. My mother became a little choked up after supper. My dad handed her a glass of water from the faucet. She went to drink it. Suddenly it fizzed up and just vanished like that. She was holding an empty glass in her hand.
It wasn't seltzer water. It just all of a sudden gone.
Yeah.
Now we were like 6, 7 years.
We're 5. We're 5 years old.
5 years old. Yeah. But we still remember it.
We called that our thirsty ghost.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that happen before. That's neat.
I know it. We didn't know what to make of it. Just, it was funny. We call it our thirsty ghost. But at night one night I heard somebody sweeping in the hallway. And of course, my parents, you can hear them breathing in bed. They're not up, but something sweeping in the hallway coming towards our room. It never went in our room, but heard voices, laughter outside the window sometimes. And Carl went quite a few steps further with what we were experiencing there.
You'll have me blushing.
Yes.
Yes, I did. Hey, did you see that? You saw that episode, right?
Yeah.
On a haunting series. It was 2016 or so.
Dangerous Games.
Season 9, Dangerous Games. Dangerous Games. And that was a fun episode. Although it tells a very real and a kind of a scary story. It was for us at the time. And it took us some years, I think, to actually acknowledge that we were living in a haunted house, because it wasn't an old, creepy dwelling.
It was a ranch house. It was very new when we moved in.
Of course, now it would be considered retro, but other people have occupied it since. But
right.
Yeah, and we're talking about the 1960s and 1970s. Really, the peak of the activity was in the 1970s, and when things went missing strangely and showed up in another area of the house, and you'd hear this very strange knockings, leave out rodents, squirrels and things. Now we'd hear the knocking almost as if it was a code. and sometimes voices outside of the windows. We had to acknowledge there was some kind of presence there. But
Yes, and
Right.
this was going on right up until we were like ages 14, 15 years old, when my brother and our sister decided they were going to communicate with whatever was there.
now you don't have to divulge everything.
Yeah,
Hey, have you noticed we're looming over you, Russell?
Mm,
It's because the screen is, we're looking down at the screen. We look like Easter Island statues.
yeah.
See, they're always a little crooked. So
yeah, I did see in that episode you guys got a Ouija board and tried to communicate with it that way.
yes, we did.
Yeah.
However, Keith avoided the Ouija board.
Yeah, I tended to avoid it. I didn't want to do that too much. But my brother and my sister met some friends on there. I call them friends, spirit friends. They came up with names, and they would have a regular nightly session. Of course, my parents just thought that we're just doing a game. It's just they think
Right.
they're moving it and everything like that. It's just a fun game that generations played. But they had their friends. My brother and sister had their friends. Buzz and Sylvia was another one.
These are the names that were spelled out on the planchette with the letters, the spirits identifying themselves, the alleged spirits.
And Sylvia began to communicate more and more, whereas I was just the onlooker. I was the observer. But Sylvia would say, the telephone's about to ring. It's your friend Susie, Carl's friend Susie. And suddenly the phone rang and it was Susie. Things like that. And so they became very interested in this friend, this board friend that would communicate with them, spell out her name, Sylvia. And tell about the first time you met with her in the cellar.
Oh, well, we got this response on the board, and that's depicted in that episode of A Haunting, where Sylvia, the spirit identifying herself as Sylvia, spelled out cellar. I said, no, how will we know you're real? Where can we see you? And spelled out cellar. Hey, there's our answer. Did it very quickly too. And so my sister and I went to excuse ourselves from the board play, went to the top of the cellar stairs, and we waited about 20 minutes or so. And then about giving up, start to go back upstairs, and we had dunk, 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 3 raps on the wooden partition along the side of the stairwell. So, whoa, I mean, nothing else could have caused that. So we're waiting to hear it again, and yes, we did hear it a second time, the 3 raps. So we're all the more interested in what's going on with the Ouija board. Keith was a little excited to hear that we met with success there. We delved into something unknown, a little spooky, because it is the unknown. Therefore, like going out into the dark without a flashlight is a little potentially dangerous. So that began our more intense Ouija board questioning.
And that seemed to very much increase the activity. The voices that I was hearing outside the window came closer and closer. The phonograph turned on by itself during a thunderstorm. One thunderstorm, I heard a woman's voice speaking clearly, although you couldn't understand what it was saying. It sounded like it may have been talking backwards, but it was speaking, obviously a woman's voice. And then Carl began seeing apparitions.
Well, my first actual meeting with Sylvia, it's very much as was portrayed in that television show, the television episode, where I was in the basement of my parents' house, and used to, before I set up my little rec room down there, we all used to hear, we didn't know what to make of it. We'd hear shuffling around. We used that space for storage. We'd hear chairs sliding across the floor. The dehumidifier would be moved. We'd find objects move the next day. So I was down there starting to doze or trying to, and then the noises started. It's like, oh, gee, I'm down here and it's happening. Now I'm hearing those things. I hadn't heard them for some months. So I got up to take a better look at it. And then as I got up, the noises stopped. And then I saw this figure of a person walking through the dimly lit room. And she's walking kind of towards me. And she veered off to the side. What was so scaring about this person, besides the fact that it was old-fashioned clothing and she shouldn't have been there, it looked like a woman, was that she made no sounds with her footfalls as she walked, totally silent. And that something about that was so dang eerie. And then she just walked by me. I mean, I'm looking at this entity, this person, just looked like a solid person until she went to the edge of the room and kind of went through the curtain without parting it. So I called for somebody to turn on the light. I don't know, it was my mom turned on the light or my brother.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. And I said, well, I had to go to the bathroom. I couldn't find my way around. So, and then that happened again within a week, I believe it was. She showed herself again. So this is a real thing. I mean, I know I'm wide awake for this, and nobody's going to believe me. I told Keith and my sister Cynthia, but they believed me. But as far as the haunted activity, my father never believed in that, and he took a very pragmatic sense to it, a very pragmatic perspective of it. My mother would believe what we told her while we were saying it, or while it happened to her. Then she would be convinced for a time, and then she'd try to explain it away. My father never did. Many years later, we had that renowned couple, Ed and Lorraine Warren, come and investigate. They offered to. I didn't call them in, but I knew Ed Warren at the time. Keith and I did. So the Warrens came and they performed their investigation. Of course, they said there's something demonic here. But we weren't being driven out. My parents were saying, we can't live like this, please. If they were at that point, I'm sure there would have been a movie made before The Conjuring. I don't know what they might have titled it the same. But it was very fascinating that these things were happening. They came on suddenly and they ceased as suddenly, they seemed to, with a little reoccurrence here and there. So, yeah, we did grow up in a haunted household, and that's what sparked our interest in exploring the paranormal. We were getting it right at home.
And my brother took, his approach to it was more experimental. I was very interested in it, but my brother would be the one that really tried to communicate with it, would use incantations if necessary to try to get it to talk, and use the board with my sister. And I did kind of shy away from that, but Carl did more of that occultic experimentation, which that's to how we first met Ed and Lorraine Warren at Rhode Island College. We attended a lecture there given by them, and we'd never heard of them, and we thought this would be fascinating to hear these people that have been around the world investigating like this. And Ed started his introduction very, very charismatic, and then he asked, is anybody here involved in the occult or any occult practices? And of course, Carl raises his hand.
I didn't exactly go like this. I was like a little shy because, this is.
No, I remember you putting your hand right up.
By the time he asked the third question, is anybody involved in occult practices? Then it was,
right.
By then it's because he kept asking, and I was the one raising my hand, and then I raised more, and then he said, has anyone been involved in occult practices? So I was like,
young man, would you come down here on the stage, please?
I felt like I was being called into the principal's office because if you've heard. I'm sure you've heard recordings of Ed Warren's voice.
Oh, yeah.
Come up here, young man. And he looked like a high school principal.
I was kind of sliding down my seat by this time. Oh, no. Okay, take it away, Carl. So
I'm thinking, what have I gotten myself into? I'm probably going to get detention for this. He's after me now.
And the young lady that I was with, Angelique, she was into occult practices too, but she was more like the white witchcraft. So
right.
She raises her hand and goes down. The young lady, would you come down here, please? And I go, and then people are starting to turn and look at me because they see we're twins. And
we became part of their lecture. They were emulsifying their talk by having the two freaks shows that admitted to being in the occult and interested in the occult. So because they could use that for their lecture.
So Carl and Angelique are kind of debating with each other, and Ed's doing the microphone, but then Ed took over and said, how dangerous it was that what they're doing. They're contacting things beyond their control. And but it was a great lecture, Ed and Lorraine did, and he thanked them both very much. He said, please stay behind. I want to talk to you guys afterwards.
And talk he did.
Yeah, and then we were introduced to a group came up and introduced themselves to us called PIRO. Parapsychological Investigation and Research Organization at Rhode Island College.
Based at Rhode Island College under their auspices.
Yes, they were Parapsychology Club.
They were the college parapsychology club, yeah.
In fact, the chairperson, Donna, was the one who had actually hired Ed and Lorraine to speak there at Rhode Island College. And they asked, would you please come to one of our meetings so you could speak? So we did. We came to one of their meetings and they became very interested. Before long, they asked us to join. And that's how we joined our first investigation group.
Oh, nice.
That led to something, though. You want to tell what that did?
Well, eventually it did lead to something. We met some good friends there and had some, we investigated, went on field trips and things like that. But we'd never gone on, except for our own house, of course, we'd never gone on a real in-house investigation with a family. But then, of course, there was no internet back then. That was before we had the internet.
We were told there was no internet.
Yeah, well, I just the military and behind the scenes people were.
No, they had their rudimentary data bank entry computers.
Right.
Yeah, so I designed a little ad. I thought it looked nice. It said we are, PIRO, Parapsychological Investigation and Research Organization, and we investigate things that are unseen and unexplained, and we do this free of charge. And I thought it was a nice little ad.
He placed an ad in the paper.
I did.
A local periodical. He put an ad in.
It was a very popular periodical, though. It was similar to the Penny Saver. Everybody picked one up and spread it. Yeah. So I thought maybe it'll be laughed at or ignored, but it's worth a chance. 3 weeks to the day later, Pyro was contacted by a woman in Harrisville, Rhode Island, by the name of Carolyn Perrin. And she said, I've been having some spirit disturbances in my house. It was interesting at first. Now it's getting very threatening. I feel that my family's in danger. Would you mind meeting with me and possibly coming to our house to investigate? So we did meet with Caroline Perrin. She told us her story, how her and her husband moved into a house from 1736. Beautiful countryside, beautiful house, needed a lot of work, but it was a beautiful house. The man who owned that house, he talked to Carolyn like he knew her. You are meant to live here. He didn't want to leave. In fact, actually, when the Perrin family and Carolyn did kind of drain their savings account to move in there without telling us first, but they moved in, and beautiful place. And the man who was living there really didn't want to leave. He stayed on another couple of weeks or so, but he did go for a walk with Roger Perrin and said, Roger, do yourself and your family a favor. Keep the lights on overnight. Roger didn't know what that meant, but he just kind of ignored it. But they had a number of terrible experiences there. It was getting worse and worse. Carolyn was very frightened, not just for herself, but for her 5 daughters. And Roger was away a lot of the time on business trips, so she would be left alone there with these things happening. So she did ask, would you please, and well, first thing she said after she told her story, she looks at us all and says, so do you think I'm crazy? And I told her, I was sitting next to her, I said, absolutely not. We're going to do our best to help you. And that was the first time I saw Carolyn smile with relief. Very, very attractive woman. She had actually done some modeling.
Noticed that.
Yeah, she had done. Yes, you would notice that. She had done some modeling, and but I noticed that her fingers were trembling while she held a cigarette, and she was a bit too thin. You could tell she was through something. So we did come to her house that Saturday, and let you take it from there, Carl.
Where did you leave off? No, we came to the house
the
on Saturday.
house,
Yes. Yeah, and of course she had. I think Keith touched on. She was interviewed by us, the Pyro group at Rhode Island College, and then she gave us directions to her house. This is before GPS, but we made it there, and so it was a very interesting day. I won't say that we were like, oh, this place is spooky. Well, actually, our case manager Donna was trembling. She was scared of all that.
Sure.
We were just eager to see what was going on, if anything.
It was a nice place, beautiful old house, but there was a feeling there. It was palpable. You could actually feel it. I certainly did. I had been reading the Bible all our way there. When I stepped foot on that property, I could feel it's almost like a force field. It was almost like something. I didn't hear this, but I got the impression we don't want you here. We don't. The family was beautiful. They were very nice, but some force just did not want you. You know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you've experienced this feeling.
Yeah, that constant pressure on your chest when you walk into a location.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a barometric pressure change.
Yep.
You can actually sense it. So we commenced the interview on the site, And as we were asking, Donna and Keith and Carl were asking questions of Carolyn and her daughters. I think Roger had left at that point. They gave us a basic tour of the house first. Interesting that upstairs there was a bedroom three bedrooms that the girls used. And in one of the bedrooms, there were two windows. One of them would not close. Now, this was August of 1973.
And that wood it was probably the original wood, over 200 years old.
Oh, you saw a lot of that.
Right, it swelled in this August humidity, and Roger had even tried taking a hammer to it, but it just would not close. So they left it open. It was nice weather. And if there was a thunderstorm, they all slept together, of course. That was their biggest room. Andrea was the eldest. She was about 15 at the time. But the younger sisters would always, they'd always crowd around her, and they'd sleep together when disturbances were happening.
Right.
Yes, I tried closing that window. Roger said, I can't close it. Interesting, in that room, it was like a stone enclosure. You might say like a crypt. It was an eerie, damp cold to that room. I should have been the hottest room because the window was open. No, I don't remember any breeze that day. The rest of the house was sweltering. So Keith will follow up on what happened when we went back into that room. But we conducted the interview downstairs, and I heard persons moving around upstairs. And I said, "Excuse me, Mrs. Perrin, do you have company up there?" And she and the girl said, No, we hear that almost every day. So I waited for the interview to recommence, and I kind of backed off, and I quietly went up the stairs and investigating. When I reached the top of the stairwell, that clutter noise stopped. The footsteps, they stopped. So I'm looking around, and something that was kind of odd. Out of my right peripheral vision, I saw something dark. I turned. It has happened so quickly. And coming towards me down where the rooms join, kind of an aisle, came at me. It was a darkness. I've called it the darkening because people still see that. Something dark it was like it wiped out vision. And my first thought was, oh, it's a house fire. That's a backdraft. I'm going to smell smoke. No, it came up to me and then was gone. Well, that was unusual. And I'm trying to think, trick of the light, my vision. What did that? So after the interview, we went upstairs. Our case manager needed some assistance going up because she was very nervous about this.
Understandably.
Yeah. I miss that, being scared of ghosts, Well, they can unnerve me, but I miss when it's so exciting, like what's going to happen next. Oh, am I going to see, getting near to some degree.
Yeah, Russell knows what we're talking about. I'm sure
that's
been through this many times. Yeah.
He's helped others through it, I'm sure.
The girls gave me a tour of the house, and they liked me. They liked me very much because I had very, very long hair. I was quite slim at the time. I worked landscaping, so my hair was platinum blonde. He
was wearing a white muslin shirt with a V-neck, and so Nancy's looking out the window when we pulled up, and she says, Keith gets out holding his Bible, and she says, "Mom, Jesus is here." That's what she said. Apparently, I made a different impression.
Yeah, right. Carl made it somewhat different.
Although I was Carolyn's favorite, she was my contact, But we had a very good time with that first day. You want to tell what happened in that room when we went upstairs?
Yeah,
interview process.
Bad feeling
after the interview, the investigation.
Yeah, bad feeling in that room. Very, very negative. And I don't claim to be overly psychic or anything, but I think everyone is to a certain extent. We still have that from our ancestors, but. I felt this like electric current going on, and but I felt so bad for the girls. I felt so bad what they were going through. They told me how frightened they were, and I asked them, "Do you have any religious beliefs?" They said, "Yes, we're Catholic." So I said, "Well, what I do what I do when I'm afraid. Try calling upon the name of Jesus." So as I said the name of Jesus, that window that wouldn't close came slamming down, just with such tremendous force, just with this big slam. And the next second, Nancy, our sisters, screamed. You could see her head go back and the hair go up. She was slapped on the left side of the head. It was significant that it was the left side of the head, too. And
you didn't know I did that?
No, you weren't.
I might as well tell you.
No,
you
didn't.
Everybody's looking at the window, so I just went on, and she's
don't believe him. He was.
Whoa, this is an angry ghost.
He was downstairs.
I confess.
He was downstairs.
No, I didn't do that. I didn't do it.
But it was like
I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
but it was like this electrical current you could just feel being pulled out. And later they told me that they felt that too, that the energy was just being, pulled right out of you. And but I kept talking. I was, of course, it was a frightening situation, but I was more angry that these girls were being put through this. So I called upon the name of Jesus twice more, tell them not to be afraid, and suddenly it left the room. Everybody's head perked up. It's gone. It just felt so peaceful. It's gone. Didn't leave the house, but it did leave the room. And I don't think it was impressed with me. It was what I was saying in faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we went downstairs, and the girls are kind of pigpiling me and saying, Mommy, they Keith called upon Jesus, and the bad spirit went away. And Carolyn was amazed and everything. So we did, and Carl and I, we did experience, and Donna, we did experience some very, very genuine activity there. So we'd say, yeah, you are not imagining this, Mrs. Perrin. This is really going on. You got somebody from outside your family that's with
Pyro's in the background. You're out of the woods. You're out of the dark. You're out of the night.
No, we weren't quite that optimistic, but we did say
that's if they make a musical of it.
Yes, that's true.
Right.
They
and I know Ed and Lorraine came in on after you guys did.
Well, that was not by coincidence. Like it's been a little controversial when I've sometimes claimed to be. I've said that were it not for my presence, that none of the conjuring industry, if you will, none of the legacy would be. The Warrens' legacy, of course, would be intact, but the Conjuring House and the 3 movies and the 4th one in the way, and then the ones that begat like Annabelle, that wouldn't have happened were it not for me being were it not for me, having come to that lecture.
I think we all had
nobody led that lecture, but I'm just saying by a series of events, and chain reaction. Now that is not a boast. To boast about starting that, and it's not that I said 40 years from now there'll be a movie. No, it was not like that. But stating that I was responsible for the kickstarting this, that I was the spark that ignited it. That would be like boasting about backing into a fire hydrant, because results were not. It wasn't a wonderful thing that happened. At least not for us.
What happened was, we met Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they did want to stay in touch with us, so we did. And Donna, invited us to join the group, which we did. I put the ad in the paper, not knowing where it would lead, but it did lead exactly 3 weeks later. Things seemed to be going in cycles of 3s too. 3 weeks and so
2, 3.
Yes. Right. And it was like 3 days afterwards, Carolyn called us. We were going to go back the next Saturday anyway, but she called us in a panic. She got in touch with Donna and told her that she'd seen this apparition in the wee hours of the morning. This woman, it was a spirit of a woman with her head bent, like the neck was broken, and just saying this snarling chant, I'll drive you mad with fiery brooms. I'll drive you mad with death and gloom. I'll drive you out. 'Twill be too late. You'll be dead. And that was enough. Carolyn just couldn't take it anymore. And we had discussed among ourselves getting in touch with Ed and Lorraine, not to call them in, but to ask for their advice. Donna called them right away, and Ed and Lorraine said, "Oh, well, we'll do more than just advise you. We'll come down there and assist you." And Carl said, "Ed, this is going to be a mutual investigation then between Pyro and you and Lorraine." "Oh yes, absolutely."
I remember being on the phone with Ed Warren in that conversation. We'll be working together with
We were very, very excited about that, getting to actually work on a case with Ed and Lorraine Warren, who had so many years of experience.
Granted, we did not call in the Warrens to assist us, and at no time did we as a team ever felt we were in over our heads. We were conducting our investigation, a scientific investigation, to the best of our means with limited equipment, but we were categorizing, documenting, and taking pictures. We just thought it would be a nice touch to consult the Warrens and instill some, more enthusiasm for the people we were helping. And we never said, "Come save us." But Ed volunteered that they would come there. They would go to this house in Harrisville. Yes.
Well, what happened was we didn't hear from Carolyn. We were hearing, Carl especially was getting calls from Carolyn like 2 or 3 times a day, talking with them. And suddenly we didn't hear from them anymore. And we wondered what was going on. We figured, well, maybe they need a little space to work this out.
Mhm.
If it's an emergency, they'll call us. And she did call us a couple of weeks later, but she talked to Carl and said, I guess you've been wondering why you haven't heard from me. And you can tell what she said.
Yeah. And well, she told me, she said, I want to apologize that I've been out of touch. And I can understand her, thinking I was a little let down because we've been talking every day and suddenly they're gone. As Keith mentioned, we thought either they were in an intense investigation with the Warrens or they'd resolved it. In any case, we seemed like we were out of it.
Yeah.
So Carolyn told me that Ed and Lorraine Warren advised them, the parents. They said, we have to be the only investigators in this case. They're just a bunch of college kids that can only get in the way. You don't want them here. We have to have the house and the investigation to ourselves. And so that's how we, we're excised from it. It was interesting, though, at that time. I'm still nostalgic about it. I don't have strong emotions about remembering that, but it was kind of I can feel some kind of nostalgia about that because it was the 70s.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's like reliving our history when we think and talk about it.
Yeah.
But Russell, I'm sure you know what the steps that happened after that. That Ed and Lorraine, stayed with the case for some time. And then they, I would not have advised this if I had been there, believe me. But they decided they've got to contact this spirit who's, in a case such as this, is strategy. Somebody's targeted. It affects the whole family, but there's always somebody who's targeted. Yep. And Carolyn was the target. Because of that, they figured she should be the catalyst. Ed and Lorraine arranged for a seance. I'm sure you've heard the story. Yeah.
Yeah, they were showmen too. Show people.
Well, they came with reporters so they could have proof of what was going on. They came with a priest, a young priest who was learning the ropes about this and who was supposed to take over in case anything went wrong. They had their reporters, and also Lorraine had a good friend of hers who was also clairvoyant, also a psychic. But Carolyn was the catalyst. She was going to sit in the middle. She was going to be the medium, so to speak. And that went horribly wrong. Meanwhile, Andrea, one of her younger sisters, got up and snuck downstairs. And these two, young kids, one's a teenager, one's a little younger, they're watching what's going on through the crack in the door. They've got the door open a little bit. And while this is happening, and all of a sudden, Carolyn just bends over in this impossible position, like she's folded up like a contortionist, begins speaking in a low guttural voice. They don't know what it was, whether it was some kind of a Native American language or some guttural. It didn't sound like any known language. And suddenly she screamed and she's hurtled, practically picked up out of that chair and thrown against the floor, just thrown out of it. And she lands some feet on the floor. For all intents and purposes, she's dead. She doesn't look like she's, and the kids are watching this. And she looks like she's not breathing. She's cold. She's limp. And of course, Roger rushes to grab her. And Ed gets in his way and said, "You really shouldn't touch the possessed at this point." That's all Roger needed to hear. He just saw white, and he just had a scuffle with Ed and pretty much bodily threw him out of the house and said, "Don't come back to my family again." Carolyn did start breathing again. She did obviously survive, but she was I don't think she was ever the same after that. She wasn't the same. She began to lose more and more weight. She began to age prematurely. This beautiful young, very articulate woman, she just she was never the same after that. It was really a traumatic experience after that. The family did live there about 10 years. They lived in, and they loved the house. I mean, it was not all negative. They loved the house. That was their house, despite the things that went on there. But it came to a time where Carolyn told Roger, "I can't spend another winter here. I will not survive. I'm going to leave you if you don't get out of here, if we don't leave." So they had to move, and they did split up anyway, but the family did move out of the house after that.
I don't think it was the haunting that split them up, though. They had other, internal strife and problems. So when the Warrens came in, they introduced the elements of supernatural. We were, as I said, conducting an investigation. When the Warrens took over, it ceased being an investigation and became an intercession. Totally subjective, no analysis, just it's demonic. That's the way it is, and that's how we're going to approach it. And what better way to drive out a spirit than hire another spirit and have a seance and find out what's going on? So it's all this irrationality, all this phantasmagoria scenario there. Like calling a ghost to chase away the ghost, have a seance to talk to the ghost. You've got a lot of invisible things going on, a lot of invisible people around, and subjectivity, like assuming that the spirits are there, and because the parents are uncomfortable, that it's a malicious haunting. And my contention, with consideration and experience, and mine, is that house on Round Top Road, 1677 Round Top Road, was not haunted until the parents took ownership of it. And I could challenge anybody that you find evidence, show me any evidence to say this house was haunted before 1970.
There was one strange thing, though, that Earl Kenyon, who owned the house before the parents, his wife had died, and he just slept out the porch. He would not sleep in the main part of the house. He slept on the porch.
I can understand that. His wife had passed.
And he would leave the lights on all night. I know some people have denied that, but there's been neighbors that, talk to the neighbors that still live there. That's the guy who used to leave his lights on all night in that house. He'd leave them on all night, all year round. I would hate to see his electric bill, but he left he left the lights on all night, and that is a fact. And
who was Earl living with at that time?
Well, his wife. He was living with his wife. The children were grown; they were out of the house. His wife then passed, unfortunately. But he really didn't want to leave. He wanted to live with the parents, actually, after a while. But
that introduces a psychological aspect. He's a widower, and he'd been married for a long time. Then he's in this big old farmhouse, and then for one person is big.
Nice guy, though, very, very nice guy, from what I've heard.
So I can understand him wanting to keep those lights on, and feeling that his wife's presence was still there or something.
Right. But I agree with Carl that the parents were the catalyst. A young couple, Roger and Carolyn, the young parents, they had 5 daughters of all different ages, and you introduce that element. As soon as they walk in there, they're seeing spirits. And Andrea and one of her sisters saw a spirit as soon as they came in. Just a friendly young guy dressed in antiquated clothes, and they thought he was a real guy. And they said hi, wondered why he was being so rude and not saying hello back. But they found out he was one of the spirits that would keep appearing to them. Seemingly a friendly spirit, but they called him Manny because he was a man. They didn't have the name for him, so they called him Manny.
And as far as corroborating that, it was, from everything I've heard, it was, sister, did you see the ghost? I just saw a ghost. What was it? A tall man? Was he dressed in a uniform? Yes, he was. And that's the corroboration there. So not being there and not seeing it myself, I really couldn't, substantiate that. But I think I can see how that caught on with them, and Carolyn being so agitated and so influenced by the atmosphere of the house.
Yeah, Carolyn did a credible amount of research. She went to the local town hall and the public library, research. Some of her research was done in a coffee house in Chepachet, where she'd have coffee with some of the local people and that had lived there for a long time. And that's when Carolyn received the idea that Bathsheba Sherman was probably the one haunting the house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you know, there's been a lot of research done into Bathsheba Sherman, Thayer Sherman Green. And she was married twice. Her first husband died. There was no evidence at all that she had anything. She was given a Christian funeral by a renowned pastor from Providence, Christian burial, and Bible verses on the family's headstones. A satanic witch just would not,
Right.
I'm not sure how she got that reputation, but she did along the years. And so that's who Carolyn believed it was, understandably, why she had heard all these things. But I really don't think, my personal belief, that spirit was nothing human. I do not think it was a human spirit. That's always been my personal take on it. Other people may have other opinions, but that's my personal take.
Yeah, and this image of Bathsheba Thayer Sherman, because the name Bathsheba is mentioned in the movie, The Conjuring. People have glommed onto that, held onto it.
Beautiful biblical name, though.
Yeah, that's
Bathsheba
why.
was in the Bible. She was the mother of King Solomon.
Not an uncommon name in the 19th century.
Yeah, it means daughter of the oath. That's what the name
It was
means.
also daughter, when they lived in Cumberland, Rhode Island, daughter Andrea Perrin's dog, who unfortunately she saw the dog get hit in the road and killed in front of her. But her dog's name was Bathsheba. But then
they call it Sheba for short. Yes.
Yeah, the ghost is Bathsheba. Now, the legend, if you will, she became the banshee of Harrisville, or that house, under, when the parents owned it. Bathsheba Sherman and the Warrens, I even quote them, the demon witch Bathsheba. She becomes a witch who stuck pins into babies' heads and made sacrifices, buried the bones in the basement. Then she evolves to, then when that becomes unpopular after the movies, really, the year after the movies released, then she becomes, well, she wasn't a murderess, but she was, an apothecary. She was she was in the town eccentric. Then that's mollified, and it's like, well, she was a friend of the family, and the truth is, she doesn't get as much recognition now. Fortunately, she should be laid to rest because her stone was destroyed, her headstone.
Yeah, they've recently replaced it, fortunately.
Yeah. But I don't think Bathsheba Thea Sherman, though she was a neighbor, meaning several miles away, like 3 miles away, I don't think she ever went into the house. There's no evidence at all that she ever went into that house, not even hearsay. And she is not mentioned in the Black Book of Burrillville. Burrillville is the town. Harrisville is a village in Burrillville. If there was anything eccentric, odd about this Bathsheba Sherman personage, it would have been recorded in the Black Book, like cow disease, or if a horse was stolen, or any
the Black Book,
out of the ordinary.
Terrible accidents like farming accidents are listed,
which
there.
were rife. Yeah, but no Bathsheba, no the strange Bathsheba, the apothecary of Bathsheba. Nothing.
There's a scene in The Conjuring, of course, where Lorraine goes into a semi-trance and she closes her eyes, says, "There's a malevolent presence in this house, and its name is Bathsheba." Now that really happened, but Lorraine did go into a slight trance, and she did say that.
We was there for that,
right? However, Carl and Donna had both been talking to Lorraine and Ed beforehand and told them all about Bathsheba, who was the suspected witch at the time and everything. So Lorraine was very aware of that situation at the time.
Yeah.
Actually, Tracy Rizzo said she was considered by many to be like a nurse. She was respected. Tracy did an essay on her.
Oh, I'd like to read that essay. I really would, actually. I really would.
Well,
thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, I don't even know if she was if anybody has any actual documentation of any commentary whatsoever about Bathsheba Sherman. I'd like to see it. I'd like to substantiate it.
It wouldn't be surprising if she was versed in home remedies, as she did own a very prosperous farm, her and her husband. And
the last I heard of somebody researching that, there were actually 2 Bathshebas that could be attributed to, and they were both innocuous, like pretty much housewives of the time.
So we've been talking about this story. Russell, you must have some questions for us.
What do you really want to know?
Yeah.
You want to know how?
What sparked your interest in demonology?
Oh, why did we become interested in the dark side?
Yeah. Me, it was from a Christian standpoint. I mean, we always liked things that were bizarre and everything growing up. But the little models and everything in the magazines. But I started doing some real history. Carl and I both research on this, and I approached it from a biblical standpoint. And my parents were wise enough to instill this in us when we were young children. We were like 5 or 6 years old. We had heard about angels and demons that existed, and all these things from in the Bible. And so we had a basic working knowledge of it, and we became more and more interested
and applied that early on. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and we wanted to help people who were going through things that they didn't understand too, because we had some disturbances in our house. Of course, what the parents were going through was much more involved. And the thing about the Perrin case, what's unusual about that is not just the intensity of it, but the length, the duration of it. That's very unusual for people to live almost 10 years with that going on, that kind of situation in a house with this much paranormal activity, where you can actually look around and you can actually see the spirits right there. They'll talk to you at night. Somebody to live through that and stay in a house for 10 years, that's a decade. That is very, very unusual.
And eventually turn it into a very lucrative business.
Yeah,
That's
true.
very unusual too, but it does happen.
Right.
Now, as far as we were saying, you said demonology. Let me see. The Round Top Farm, parents, demon. Nope, wasn't demonically haunted. No demon in the Conjuring house. See?
Right.
Okay.
Well,
But
nobody likes to say that, but nobody likes to say about the D word. But the it
we
is,
can say demonologist, but to say
yeah, right. The D word we say. I use the term contrary spirits most of the time.
I like that. It sounds
Yeah.
very
Yeah, because
colloquial.
yes, because these kind of
Yeah.
spirits they'll go in a counterclockwise position. They'll like Nancy was hitting the left side of the head. Things will go backwards. They'll go counterclockwise. That's a calling card of these kinds of spirits. So I sometimes refer to them as contraries. But I'm sure you've heard there was a recent fire in the barn there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and fortunately it was contained. It was
2.5 months ago.
fire. This, God bless them. The communities, the fire services from all these communities came in, and that if it hadn't been so prompt, that barn never would have been saved. But some of it's had to be rebuilt, but it's gorgeous. I've seen pictures. It's beautiful now. So fortunately, it was saved, and very, very active house to this day. A lot goes on there. There's it's constantly busy. They have the tours there, private, public events. A lot of they just recently had a grand New Year's Eve event there. So it's always going on. Jacqueline Nunes, who owns the house now, does a wonderful business there. So it's very, very. She's in love with that house, which you need to be. You really need to love. You can't just be like a side and be, the Heinzens before her. They love the house, but it got a little too much for them. It's just very overwhelming when you're running a business like that, which is constant day and night. Because they had a background as investigators, and give them credit for bringing it to where it is today. And then Jacqueline Nunes, who owns it now, is doing a wonderful, wonderful job.
Yeah, Jacqueline Nunes out of Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my introduction to demonology was after that case, and I was apart from Pyro, at this point. I knew a Hispanic origin family that lived in Providence, Rhode Island. Parents were Dominican and Puerto Rican. So because I was acquainted with this family, then when a disturbance happened of a apparently supernatural nature, I was invited to stay overnight. The subject of this disturbance was a 16-year-old boy, one of their children, the son, and one of two sons. And he seemed to be going under these spells or fits, these episodes, if you will, where another personality, a hostile personality, would take over. And so I was invited to stay the night and observe him. I was flattered that they had that kind of confidence in me, but even then I attributed to, and I was 21 years old, 22 by this point. And I thought, no, I was a little old. I was like 20.
Yeah, you were in early 20s. Yeah.
I was young. And, what they told me, I attributed that to perhaps epilepsy combined with some sort of dissociative personality disorder, as we called it then. Some psychological imbalance. The boy was 16. Was he? No, 14. 14 years old.
Yes.
So I stayed the night, a little apprehensive. I said, I hope he doesn't have one of his fits while I'm here, but we'll see. I'll evaluate and give my opinion. So it's about 1 a.m. So I'm drifting off to sleep. I'm on a couch, sofa, like outside of his bedroom on the 3rd floor. About 1 o'clock. And then I was startled into alertness by this ear-splitting scream. How do you describe something like that? It was awful. To be jolted, got up off the couch when the boy screams. Yeah, it was Lucas from his bedroom. All right, I fumbled for the wall light switch, the overhead light. And when I turned on the light, I saw his bedroom door swing open on its own, and this boy's body was thrown out of the bedroom. It was propelled, thrown out,
Oh wow.
and his body was spinning around on the floor. I'm not talking breakdancing. It was a lot faster than that. His body was spinning around and careening into the walls, propelled by some unseen force. And of course, there's nothing I could do. I'm just standing amazed. I've never seen anything like that. I have since, but up till then, that was the first time I saw somebody being levitated and pushed and starting to climb on the wall. And then his family, alerted by his shrieking, they came into the bedroom, and the boy did a backwards flip onto the couch where I'd been reclining, and he started to jump up and down and flap his hands like wings. And he's this deep guttural laughter, harsh laughter comes out of his throat, but very loud. And then he looked at me with this glare and jumped at me. I wanted to restrain him without injuring him, but
Right.
that wasn't my secondary concern, because he jumped at me, and I had him on the floor, and he pushed me right off. He was a slender boy, and of 14 years old, and I was my usual heavy self, and he threw me right off. And then he came to his senses to a degree, but he was panic stricken. He was calling for his uncle and shivering and crying. So, I mean, this was no pretense at all. You just knew that. Besides what he was flying, how he's flying around the room. So we tried to think of a strategy, I and some of the family members, and his godmother, who it turned out was Santorian.
Yes.
So we thought of having we didn't call it an exorcism or an expulsion at that time, but it was a session to try and persuade the spirit to move on.
Right.
It turned out it was an expulsion, a Santorian expulsion, which Keith and I, we were both there. We didn't expect that.
Yeah, I was told it was going to be a Catholic intervention, and the family asked us, would we please assist, because we were kind of versed in these things and we were friends with the family. Would we please? I said, I'd be honored to assist. And I interviewed them. They said they were Catholic, and so I figured it was going to be a Catholic exorcism or intervention. Yeah. I'd be honored to assist a priest as a lay person, and I would do exactly what I was told, be respectful. But we came in, the setting was very, very different. There was, candlelit all over the place, very low lighting, and a big punch bowl. And I said, what is that, dessert? Is that, no, that's the holy water, all fruits and pulp in it and everything like that.
Yeah, it looked like sangria, but it's their holy water.
Right. I'm looking around. Where's the priest? Where's the priest? And I asked, and then I found out this is a Santorian exorcism. So
yeah, talk about being invited to a party and you're dressed all wrong for it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, it was like that. I didn't know it was a costume ball.
Right, so, exactly.
Yeah. And but we were there. We're going to make the best of it. And like I said, I was called in to address this. They wanted me to fix it. How do you do that? And so I was glad Keith was there, because he's got a very common stressful situations. Now, when this procedure started, it was a week later. They had an altar set up, a Santorian altar, and chairs in a semicircle. I was in the center chair of that semicircle. And when it began, after some prayers and chanting, the room first of all, the room shook like somebody was shaking the house. I wondered, is this a truck going by? Do we have an earth tremor? But the house just shook, and it was no external cause. And then it became quiet again. And my chair, Keith remembers this, my chair with me in it moved back across the floor to the wall. Just my chair with me in it. Yeah, that sounds very dramatic.
It was a pretty big chair too. Carl was sitting in a big. All of a sudden, it's going. Carl's looking around. We felt a rumble go through the floor, and when it came to Carl's chair, it just moved right back. And that's the second time. It was about 6.5 years since we were in the parent house originally. That's the second time I had felt that energy just being pulled right out of that nauseous feeling and energy being pulled right out. You know something had crossed over into our dimension. And then suddenly the boy who was smiling self-consciously.
The key word there, suddenly. Yes. Had a chance to be started.
Right.
He fell out of his chair and he just taken right over. His eyes opened up very wildly. He became very, very animalistic, screeching. And I don't know how he did this without injuring himself, but it looked like a rag doll. He was being picked up, thrown down, picked up.
He was being, but not by a person.
Mm-hmm.
You see what happens on the wrestling shows, which of course are all authentic.
Yeah.
You know the wrestling, the popular wrestling, like, you know,
right.
That's what was happening to him.
Then he lurched up like a cobra with his hands by his side and began swaying like a cobra back and forth.
Boy, I tell you, we were so primitive. I wish I had some kind of camcorder. Well, we didn't call them camcorders.
Right,
but wish I had a movie camera.
I didn't bring any recording devices out of respect for the family because you know you don't in Catholicism especially you don't film an exorcism and you know even a baptism, which is a form of exorcism, is not really supposed to be televised at all. So I wasn't going to bring any recording devices just out of respect. But I wish I had now, considering what happened.
Yeah. There was a picture of Jesus that I looked at. I was hoping the boy would, his name's Lucas. I was hoping the boy would look at that picture and maybe get distracted. So I looked at it. I looked up back at him. A moment later, I looked back down at the picture. That picture had inverted itself. So if there had been security cameras in that room, there would be footage of that picture inverting itself. But I didn't hear it happen. And
just think if they had what they had now, if they had home security devices, you would have seen this all happening.
It was kinetic energy. I mean, it was a really bizarre scene. The Santorinas, they throw a good party. And not that they weren't taking it seriously, because we all were. I just wanted to be anywhere else but there. I said, I want to get back to my parents' house in Scituate. There's food in the refrigerator. I want to deal with this. But of course, on the outside, I'm being very calm.
It's very, very exhausting. Very exhausting.
And, composed. And at one point, Lucas started to advance toward me like this Dracula, stance. And he's coming out. He's glaring in my eyes with that wild look. I didn't know what to do, so I held up my hand and I said, stop. And he stopped. And I said, you're going to be all right. And you know what? That, to our surprise, that procedure was actually successful. I won't say it was all, me and my stoic demeanor. It certainly wasn't the procedure itself.
Right.
It came together. It gave this boy resolution, and something left the room and left him.
Yeah, but what happened, though, during the exorcism, his aunt, who was the officiate there, she suddenly, in the middle of it, all of a sudden, she gets up. Now, there was a little, statue of a Buddha, painted black for some reason. That's where her familiar spirit lived in. And suddenly, she went rigid. And she went right into that altar and smashed. Very stout woman. She just smashed into that altar. And it looked like she was having a tonic-clonic seizure. She was convulsing and everything.
I wish I had that on film.
But usually when somebody has a regular, grand mal seizure, they're pretty out of it. All of a sudden she sits up and her eyes are blackened and serpentine. And usually when somebody is actually under legitimate possession, their facial features will remain the same. And I call this, I've seen somebody else go under, and they had the tragedy mask with the serpentine eyes, but the mouth turned down. This woman had a silly smile on with her eyes blackened out. And I call that the comedy mask. It's just like in theater, the tragedy and comedy mask. She had the comedy mask and she was swaying back and forth. And she asked for a cigar and she's speaking in Spanish. And then she sees Carl and I, come on, I'll tell your fortunes. I'll tell your fortunes. And I'm thinking, this is not what we came here for. Meanwhile, the boy's sitting in a daze like that. But that shows, if it was two different entities, that shows how they work together to avoid the expulsion.
Yeah. Now, you might say, a realist would say this was all psychological. You can map it out how this happened, except, well, what about all the strange things, the pictures flying off the wall and that other picture of Jesus turning upside down and the boy doing things impossible? Well, of course, accelerated motor performance, and there's psychokinetic energy making these things happen.
Right.
And the rest is all purely psychological. Yes, that's true. But then somebody could say, but there was obviously a spirit in that room and the impossible was happening. And this was, this boy was going through possession. Yes, that's true. They're both true because in that environment, they produced their own reality. The boy was possessed. Spooky things were happening. Objects were moving about that room in a way that could not be explained ordinarily. So both realities are true. Yeah, big psychological, uh, influence, big psychological scenario, like a psychodrama. But
Right.
also what you could classify as inaccurately, you could say is the supernatural, is also happening because that reality was produced. The reality where spirits do come through us and speak through us and take over us, that was produced there. And it has been, and will be.
Well, these types of spirits do look for psychological weakness too. They do not hesitate to pick on those who are going through depression, through mental instability. Children who are going through teenagers are going through traumatic times. They will not hesitate to seep their way through if they're given an advantage. Now, when my brother and sister were playing with the board, I believe most of the time that's psychological. You're answering your own questions. You're
Right.
subconsciously you're answering your own questions. It only takes that once for something to slip in. And can't say it's uninvited because it has been legally invited in a spiritual
Yeah.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah,
we're at our hour mark. I got another podcast coming on after me. So
okay, well, hopefully we're going to be doing part 2 because we're told about
Yeah.
2 cases we were involved with, our formative years.
Yeah, I'll have you guys on again.
Oh yeah, please do. It's been our pleasure. I can speak for Keith.
Yeah, thank you for asking us, Russ.
You're
welcome. Let my audience know if somebody needs help, how they can get a hold of you guys.
Myself, it's very easy. Keith and Sandra Johnson, just do a search for us. You can find us. NEAR is our group, New England Anomalies Research, NEAR Paranormal, or Keith or Sandra Johnson. We're very visible on the on media, social media, if you need help.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick answer. PanoramaParanormal.com. PanoramaParanormal.com. That's a group that functions with just 2 members, myself and Elise Gianmarco Carlson, historian. And, one of our cases, a very recent case, was actually featured on an episode of A Haunting. And it's called Inner Demons, and it's a pretty accurate depiction of what happened. Mm-hmm. So yeah, PanoramaParanormal.com, contiguous. Mm-hmm. So you got Keith and Sandra Johnson at
NearParanormal.com, or just Keith and Sandra Johnson, and PanoramaParanormal.com.
And you can track us down on Facebook. We're not that hard to find.
All right. I thank you guys again for coming on, and I thank everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again next week.
Been our pleasure.
And it'll definitely be a part 2.
Oh, looking forward, really.
All right. I thank you guys.
Thank you, Russell. God bless.
God bless.